I used to think I was just your typical high school girl. Nothing special, nothing dramatic. My days were pretty routine. Wake up too early, rush through classes, hang out with my friends, maybe cram some homework late at night. I wasn't popular, but I wasn't invisible either. I had a small circle of people I trusted, and that was enough for me. At the time, I had this boyfriend. We'd been together for a couple months. It wasn't anything serious. We were both kind of awkward and new to the whole dating thing. We'd text a lot, sit next to each other at lunch, sometimes hang out after school. We kissed a few times, held hands in the hallway. Looking back, it felt more like playing at being in a relationship than actually being in one. It was innocent, clumsy, honestly, kind of sweet and kind of dumb in the way high school relationships often are. So, when I first missed my period, I didn't panic. Not even a little. My cycle was never that regular to begin with. I could go 5 or 6 weeks without it showing up, and I'd always just blame it on stress or a weird sleep schedule or whatever. Exams were coming up and I had 3 different projects due. I was drinking too much coffee and barely sleeping. It made sense to me. One late period didn't feel like a warning sign. And when the second month came and went without anything, I still didn't worry. Not really. I was tired, yeah, but everyone was. It was senior year. I had a million things on my mind. College applications, scholarship essays, picking yearbook photos. I remember one weekend when I slept through most of Saturday and my mom just said, "Your body's catching up with you?" And I nodded. That was my explanation too. School was exhausting. Life was exhausting. What teenager isn't tired? I wasn't getting sick. I wasn't throwing up in the mornings or anything like that. My clothes still fit. My stomach looked basically the same, maybe a little softer, but I figured that was from all the late night snacks and not going to the gym as often. I never felt anything that screamed, "Something's going on." Just little things that felt too small to mean anything on their own. The first time someone brought it up was in the cafeteria. I was sitting with my best friend, and we were talking about something completely random. I think a teacher who always wore the same tie, and out of nowhere, she looked at me and said, kind of joking, "You're not, like, pregnant or anything, right?" I laughed. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it felt so absurd. Like, how could I be? I wasn't even sure we'd done anything that could lead to that. I was confused about that part of my life in general. We were both pretty naive and nervous. And even if something had happened, I didn't think it had. I told her, "No way. God, no. Definitely not." But after she said it, I started noticing things. I'd gained a couple pounds. I was always hungry, like, constantly. I thought it was just boredom, or maybe I was finally going through a second growth spurt or something. There were times when my stomach felt weird. Like something shifted or moved, but I thought it was gas. Or maybe muscle twitches from sleeping in a weird position. I had this one habit, drinking iced coffee first thing in the morning on an empty stomach, and sometimes I'd get nauseous afterward. I blamed the coffee. I'd skip breakfast, drink something cold and sweet and full of caffeine, and then feel sick. That's normal, right? I never once thought this might be morning sickness. It just didn't even cross my mind. PE was still part of my schedule. I ran laps. I changed clothes in the locker room. I wore leggings and hoodies like everyone else. Sometimes I caught a girl or two glancing at my stomach, especially when we were getting dressed. I wasn't big, but I wasn't flat anymore either. I just told myself I needed to lay off the sugar. I even joked about going on a diet. People laughed. I laughed. That's how I handled things, just push the weird feelings aside and make a joke. I think a part of me knew way in the back of my mind, but I didn't let it get close. I had too much going on. I didn't want my life to be interrupted. I didn't want to be that girl. You know the one. The rumor, the headline, the whisper in the hallway. I thought, no, that's not me. That'll never be me. So I just kept going. Every day. School, friends, homework, sleep. I didn't take a test. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to deal with the what if. I told myself, I'm probably just being dramatic. Everything's fine. But it wasn't. And it wouldn't be for much longer. The thing about denial is that it works until it doesn't. Weeks kept passing, and I kept ignoring what my body was telling me. I gained a little more weight, nothing super noticeable, just enough that my jeans started feeling snug. My mom said it was probably stress eating. I agreed. I even started sneaking out to the corner store after school to grab snacks, chips, candy, sweet stuff. It made me feel better, for a few minutes. That's what I told myself. But then there was the movement. At first, I thought it was just digestion. Like when your stomach gurgles or tightens up after eating too fast. But it was different. It was lower down. And it didn't feel like gas. It was like a tiny bubble rolling under my skin or a twitch, but smoother. At one point I googled muscle spasms in stomach and convinced myself it was just something harmless. I had a whole theory that maybe I wasn't eating enough protein or drinking enough water. I refused to type pregnancy movement into that search bar. I was scared of what might pop up. Still, my body was changing. I could feel it every time I looked in the mirror, even if I didn't admit it out loud. My stomach had this subtle roundness now. I noticed it most at night when I changed into pajamas. Standing in the bathroom in just a tank top and underwear, brushing my teeth, I'd catch a glimpse and freeze. I'd suck it in, turn sideways, check again. Then I'd pull down my shirt fast and tell myself to stop being paranoid. I think the scariest part was how normal everything felt on the surface. I still went to school. I still hung out with my friends. I took quizzes, wrote essays, laughed at dumb TikToks. I wasn't sick, not really. I didn't have cravings or weird emotional breakdowns. I just felt tired. A lot. Sometimes, like, fall asleep in the middle of my geometry homework tired. I'd walk home from school and need to lie down the second I got in the door. I blamed it on senior burnout. So did everyone else. Nobody said anything. At least not to my face. But I could feel it. The way a couple of girls in the locker room would glance over when I changed. The way one of the boys in history class made a comment when I stood up too slowly, like I was suddenly fragile. I laughed it off. I'm just lazy today, I told him. I made everything into a joke. That was easier than admitting I didn't have control anymore. Then one morning I woke up feeling off. It was a Friday. I remember because I had a test first period and I hadn't studied. My alarm went off and when I sat up, the room spun. Like, actually spun. I had to grip the edge of my bed to keep from tipping sideways. My vision blurred and there was this sharp cramp low in my stomach that made me stop breathing for a second. I tried to stand, but my knees gave out, and I had to sit back down. I heard my mom walking down the hallway, and I called out for her. My voice sounded weird, thin, shaky. She opened my door, and her face immediately shifted from annoyed to scared. She didn't even ask questions. She just said, "Get dressed. We're going to the doctor. Now." At the clinic, I sat on the paper-covered table while a nurse checked my blood pressure and asked if I'd eaten. I lied and said yes. Then she asked the question I'd been dreading. When was your last period? I shrugged. I don't really keep track, I said, like it was no big deal. She raised an eyebrow. Has it been more than a couple months? I hesitated, then nodded. Maybe. She gave me a look I'll never forget. Not judgmental. Not exactly kind either. Just focused. She stood up and said, "We're going to run a few tests. Just to be sure." I wanted to ask sure about what? But I already knew. I knew. After that, everything happened fast. Blood drawn. A test. Then waiting in a cold room while my mom scrolled silently through her phone. She didn't say anything, just kept glancing at me out of the corner of her eye. Her whole body was tense. Mine too. When the doctor came in, he didn't sit down. He stood by the door with a clipboard and said calmly, "So, you're about 6 months along." I blinked. My mom stared at him like she didn't understand English. I felt the floor disappear from under me. 6 months? I couldn't even form words. It didn't make sense. I was just in school yesterday. I had gym class. I carried a backpack, climbed stairs, danced in my room. There was no way a baby had been growing inside me that whole time. I would have known, wouldn't I? But I hadn't known. Not really. I'd brushed it all off. Every sign. Every weird feeling. Every skipped period and morning of nausea. I didn't want to believe it, and so I didn't. Until now. My mom didn't scream. She didn't throw anything or storm out. She just sat there in stunned silence, her hand over her mouth. After a long pause, she whispered, "Oh my God." I sat there, frozen. My body didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a stranger's. I was 6 months pregnant. And my life, my normal, boring, predictable life, was officially over. I don't remember the ride home. I think I just stared out the car window the whole time, watching the streets blur past like they weren't real. My mom didn't talk. Her hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight, I thought it might snap. We didn't even put on the radio. Just silence. Heavy, thick, terrifying silence. When we got home, she went straight to her room and shut the door. I heard her crying. Not loud sobbing, just quiet, steady crying. The kind that makes you feel worse than if someone had yelled. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my reflection in the mirror. Same face. Same hair. Same hoodie. But not the same girl. I kept thinking, how did I not know? How did I miss it? But the real question was, what do I do now? Everything was spinning. One minute I was thinking about prom and my college essay, and the next minute I was pregnant. Not barely pregnant. Not a few weeks. Maybe you could pretend this isn't real pregnant. I was 6 months. That's more than halfway. That's third trimester in just a few weeks. That's when the baby starts kicking, turning, becoming real. Except I was still pretending it wasn't. I tried texting my best friend, but didn't know what to say. Just typing, hey, felt wrong. So I deleted it. Later that night, my mom came into my room. Her face was blotchy, and her eyes were red. She sat down next to me, and for a long time, we didn't say anything. Then finally she whispered, "Why didn't you tell me?" I couldn't even look at her. "I didn't know," I said, and it sounded so weak and pathetic out loud. "You didn't notice anything?" she asked, not angry, more confused. Like she couldn't figure out how something this huge could happen without anyone realizing. "I thought it was stress," I said. "I thought it was just nothing." Then she asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Who's the father?" I felt my stomach twist. I said his name quietly. She didn't recognize it. "We weren't serious," I told her. "We're not even talking anymore." I could tell she wanted to ask more, but instead she just sighed and stood up. "We'll figure this out," she said. "But I need to sleep." "I can't," her voice cracked. "I can't think right now." I lay awake most of the night, staring at the ceiling. I kept putting my hand on my stomach, trying to feel something. Not kicks or movements, just some kind of connection. Something that said, yes, this is happening. But I still felt like I was outside of my body, watching all of this happen to someone else. The next few days were a blur. I didn't go to school right away. My mom called in and said I was sick. She told me I had to see a specialist and get an ultrasound. I didn't want to. I didn't want to lie on that table and see whatever was growing inside me. I still didn't want to believe it was real. But I went. And when they did the ultrasound, and I heard the heartbeat, something inside me cracked. It was loud, steady, fast. I stared at the screen, at this blurry, gray little shape, and I felt the tears coming before I could stop them. Not panic tears. Not fear. Just something deeper. Like my whole life had suddenly split in two, before and after. I wasn't just a girl with a problem anymore. I was a girl with a baby. When I finally went back to school, everything was different. Word had gotten out. I'm not sure how. Maybe someone at the clinic, maybe a friend I didn't mean to tell. But people knew. I could feel it. The stares in the hallway. The whispering behind my back. Even some of the teachers acted weird. Not mean, just awkward. Like they didn't know if they were supposed to say something or not. One girl flat out asked me in the bathroom, "Is it true?" I just looked at her and said, "Yeah." She didn't say anything after that. Just nodded and left. Some of my friends stayed close. They checked in on me, offered to walk with me to class, asked if I needed anything. But others pulled away. I saw it in the way their texts got shorter, or how they sat farther away at lunch. It hurt, but I couldn't blame them. This was big, awkward, scary. I was a reminder of something no one wanted to think about. I had to start going to doctor appointments regularly. My mom took off work when she could. We didn't talk much during the drives. Sometimes she'd ask, "How are you feeling?" And I'd just say, "Fine." But one night, after a particularly hard day, she came into my room and sat on the edge of my bed. "I'm mad," she said.
"I'm scared.
"But I love you. We're going to get through this. You're not alone." That night, for the first time, I let myself cry in front of her.
I didn't know what was going to happen next.
I didn't know if I was keeping the baby. I didn't know what my future looked like. Everything was cracked and uncertain. But I knew one thing. There was no going back. I used to walk through school like I was invisible. Not in a bad way, just normal. I wasn't the popular girl, but I had my group. I got decent grades, I wore jeans and hoodies and kept my head down when the principal walked by. I laughed with friends at lunch. I liked being anonymous, blending in. But now, walking down the hall felt like walking through a spotlight. Everyone looked. Even when they tried not to, I could feel it. The glances. The whispers. People nudging each other. Girls whispering behind lockers. Guys turning around when I passed, their eyes immediately dropping to my stomach. It wasn't even that big, not really, but it was different now. I was different. There was no hiding it anymore. I didn't know what to do with my hands. I kept tugging my hoodie down or crossing my arms in front of my stomach. But nothing helped. I could still feel them looking. The worst part wasn't even the gossip. It was the teachers. The ones who used to call on me every week now barely made eye contact. One teacher, my English teacher, didn't even say anything when I missed an assignment. Just gave me a pitying smile and told me to take my time. I hated that. I didn't want pity. I didn't want to be treated like I was fragile or broken. I just wanted to feel normal again, but nothing about this was normal. And then there were the questions. Are you going to keep it? Was it on purpose? Who's the dad? Are you still coming to prom? Some of them came from people I barely even talked to before. Suddenly, everyone thought they had the right to know everything. Like I was a story now.
Acconscionalità.
A warning. But no one knew how scared I was. No one saw me at night, lying in bed with my hand on my stomach, wondering what the hell I was supposed to do. Wondering how I was going to finish school, how I was going to raise a baby, how I was going to face every single day when all I wanted to do was hide. I tried to talk to the baby sometimes. Just in my head. Like, hey, you okay in there? Or you really picked a wild time to show up, huh? Sometimes, I thought I felt a response. A flutter. A tiny roll. It felt weirdly comforting and terrifying at the same time. I didn't know if I wanted to keep it. I didn't even know what keeping it really meant. Keeping meant changing everything. School, college, my body, my freedom, my whole entire life. Giving it up meant a whole different kind of pain, one I wasn't sure I could handle. My mom tried to help, but I could see it was hard for her too. She was doing everything, calling clinics, scheduling appointments, Googling support programs. But at night, I heard her crying sometimes through the wall. Once, I walked into the kitchen and found her staring at my baby photo on the fridge, just frozen there, her hand resting on the magnet like she didn't even know she was touching it. We were both lost. One day, after school, she sat me down and asked gently, "Have you thought about adoption?" I nodded. "I've thought about everything." We sat in silence for a while, and then she said something I'll never forget. "Whatever you choose, I'll be beside you. But you have to choose. And you have to be sure." I wasn't sure. How could I be? I was 17. I hadn't even figured out my major yet, let alone how to be a mom. I didn't even know how to budget or drive on the freeway without panicking. I still slept with a nightlight sometimes. How was I supposed to raise a person? At school, it got harder. Some friends pulled away entirely. They stopped inviting me to hang out, stopped sitting with me. I could feel the way I made them uncomfortable now. Like being around me made it real, that this could happen to any of us. They didn't say it, but I could tell. Others stuck by me. One girl, Alyssa, walked with me to every class. She texted me every morning. "You good?" She didn't ask too many questions. She just stayed, and that meant more than anything. Still, I felt so alone sometimes. So small. So crushed under the weight of everything. I remember standing in front of my mirror one day and lifting my shirt slowly. My stomach was rounder.
Tighter.
It didn't look like me anymore. I placed my hand on it and I whispered, "I don't know what I'm doing." And then, like a response, there was a little kick.
Soft.
Like a tap from the inside. I sat down on the edge of my bed and cried. Not from fear, for once. From something deeper. Like, okay, you're really there. And I really have to figure this out. From that moment, something shifted. I didn't have answers. But I stopped pretending I could go back to who I was before. That version of me, the girl who laughed in the locker room, who stressed over finals and crushes, she was still there, but she wasn't alone anymore. Now, it was the two of us. And even though I was still scared, still unsure, I started to believe maybe, just maybe, I could do this. The days turned into weeks. I kept going to school. I kept showing up, even when I didn't want to. I walked the same hallways, sat at the same desk, listened to the same lectures, but everything felt different now. People still stared. Whispers still followed me like a shadow. But little by little, it didn't sting as much. I stopped hiding my stomach. I stopped trying to make myself small. I started to show. Really show. It became harder to pretend like nothing was happening. The baby kicked more now. Sometimes in the middle of class, I'd flinch without meaning to, feeling this little stretch or bump under my ribs. The first time that happened, I looked around, wondering if anyone else noticed. They didn't. But I did. And for the first time, I smiled a little. Something about feeling the baby move, not just once, but over and over, made it all real in a way nothing else could. This wasn't a theory or a crisis or a nightmare anymore. This was a person. Inside me. A whole future I was somehow building from the inside out. I started talking to it more. Not loudly. Just in whispers. In little thoughts. Sorry, school is boring. You'll hate math too, probably. I don't know what we're doing yet. But I'm trying. I started keeping a little notebook. Not a journal, exactly, more like a space to spill things out without judgment. Some pages were full of raw panic. Others were lists of names I liked, of things I might need, of songs I wanted to sing to them. One night, I drew a picture of a tiny hand holding mine. I stared at it for a long time. My mom became less angry, less overwhelmed. She started helping me research programs for young mothers, alternative graduation plans, scholarships. She even found a local support group for teen moms and offered to go with me. We still had arguments. We were both scared and under pressure. But she hugged me more. She started calling the baby the little one. Sometimes I caught her knitting while watching TV. She never said it was for the baby, but I knew. One night, I came downstairs and found her making a list. Diapers, car seat, baby clothes. She looked up and said, "We'll figure this out. One step at a time." And I believed her. I still wasn't sure what I was going to do, if I was going to raise the baby myself or go through with adoption. Some days I thought I could be strong enough. Others, I felt like I could barely take care of myself. But I was learning that not knowing didn't make me a bad person. It just made me human. When I walked into school one Monday morning, my principal called me into his office. I thought I was in trouble. My heart pounded the whole walk there. But when I sat down, he surprised me. "We've been thinking about ways to support you," he said gently. "You're still a student here, and your goals still matter." He offered a modified class schedule, online options, counseling. I didn't cry in front of him, but when I left the office, I went into the bathroom, locked the stall, and let the tears come. Not from shame. From relief. I wasn't being pushed out. I wasn't being forgotten.
I was still allowed to try.
Later that week, one of the girls who had stopped talking to me months ago came up after class and said, "I'm sorry I disappeared. I just didn't know what to say. But you're kind of amazing." I didn't know what to say either. So I just smiled and said, "Thanks." By the time spring rolled around, I'd made a decision.
I wasn't going to hide.
I was going to walk at graduation. Maybe not in heels. Maybe not with the same carefree joy everyone else had. But I was going to finish this chapter the way I started it. Standing on my own 2 feet. One night, I stood in front of the mirror again. My belly was round now, full and firm. The baby kicked just under my ribs and I rubbed the spot gently. I looked into my own eyes and whispered, "I'm not just a student anymore. I'm not just a teenager." I rested my hand over my heart, then my stomach. I'm a mother. And I'm scared. But I'm here. And in the silence, I heard that familiar rhythm, soft and steady, the heartbeat I'd heard on the monitor that first day. Except now I carried it like a second pulse inside me, a reminder that I wasn't alone anymore. This was my life now. Not ruined. Not over. Just changed. And I was changing with it.